What's up, duelists? My goodness, yesterday, RBET series kicked off with an absolute banger of a tournament. 144 entrants, which is crazy. Like, that's like the size of a small regional. Shout out to everyone who entered. First off, big shout out to everyone who entered. Second off, shout out to the head judge Mika, Jazz for all of his help with the bot and the server. Shout out to Hydro Pump and Kazuki for helping me commentate. We were live for 12 hours because we were determined to finish the tournament in one sitting, and we did. And it was honestly hype all the way through, from start to finish. Didn't get bored even once, despite being there for 12 hours straight. What a crazy, crazy event. I know you guys are all like buzzing, itching to see what did well, and that's what this video is all about. We're going to talk about the metagame a little bit. Going to talk about the top 8 decks, talk about some of their card choices, talk about maybe why some of the players did some of the things. I've had the luxury of talking to a few of these guys already and seeing why they decided to pick some of the cards they picked. So let's get right into things. First things first, let's check out the metagame. We had a bit of a crazy outbreak deck in the form of Diva Heroes. There was 21 Diva Hero decks in the tournament, and there was 10 Gemini Hero decks, making 31 Absolute Zero decks out of 144 entrants. That's a whopping 21% of the field playing Absolute Zero decks. Now, for some of you guys, that may seem like 21%, that's nothing, you know what I mean? We've seen metagames where it's literally one deck. There's like 99% Dragon Rulers or whatever. Yeah, but Edison Format is insanely diverse. All right, it is the most diverse format. No cap, on God, 100 emoji, fire emoji. So to see something take up a fifth of the field is pretty crazy. It's pretty insane. But the question everyone is asking is, did the hero decks deliver? And let me tell you, they did. 3 decks out of the top 8, nearly half, were Absolute Zero decks. There's 2 Diva Hero and 1 Gemini Hero. But we also had some crazy decks that we've never even seen or heard of also make top 8 in this tournament as well. If you do break down the difference between Gemini Hero and Diva Heroes, then there was 7 different decks in the top 8. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of those decks. The first deck is 8th place Yomero Diva Hero. This was one of the Diva decks that did end up making it to top 8. This deck's very interesting. It's got no bottomless trap hole, 1 D Prism, 1 Dust Tornado, quite interesting. He opted not to play Gaia or Gishilnadon. He played Darkfire plus 1 Instant Fusion for an instant level 6, and he also played Elemental Hero Bubble Man. I'm curious about the inclusion of this. Another interesting inclusion in the deck is the 2 copies of Dark Refer and the Foolish Burial. He must have really valued getting his heroes in the grave, his Malicious and his Plague, so apparently that must have worked out well for him. Had live Miracle Fusions, had access to everything he needed to have access to, and if you draw dead Greffers, I mean, just pitch it to the other Greffer or pitch it to your copies of Wing Blast. In the sideboard, he's got his Chimera Tech, which he cut from the extra deck to make space. He's also got 2 Super Poly for the Mirror Match, 2 copies of Jinzo, which is a really sick card. This is a card you can turbo out against decks like Blackwings or Glads that play a ton of traps, and they have a lot of trouble dealing with this. He opted to sideboard his copy of Trap Dust Shoot, which is very interesting. This is normally a super powerful card to have in your deck, in the main deck, just to, have a shot at activating it on the first turn of the game 1, but must have worked out well for him. I mean, he made top 8. Got My Body as a shield as some extra protection, a sideboard return for decks that are trying to remove all your stuff, and then the 3rd copy of Snowman, Soul Release, DD Crows, for some graveyard hate. Pretty clean deck list overall, I have to say. Not much to complain about here. Looks pretty solid. Next up, 7th place Syrup. Got 7th place with this Diva Zombie deck list. Kind of funny, he has this 1 copy of Gale down here. Clearly this was a last minute inclusion, as he didn't even choose to include the Armed Wing or the Armor Master in his extra deck. But, I mean, it worked out well for him. I think we saw it on camera doing some work. Some big moves in this deck list is playing 3 copies of Book of Life. This card is phenomenal against the Miracle Fusion decks. It's also very good against some of the other decks that are trying to do unfair graveyard stuff. And I think this heavily contributed to his success. He was able to find Book of Life in a lot of the matches we saw on camera, and it was great for him. The deck list looks pretty standard. It does include 1 copy of Necrogardener, which is an interesting inclusion. And he also opted to include the copy of Illblood that was in Jike's first place list from Pumpkin of Games, was it? Pumpkin of Games, yeah, that's what it was. He's got his Burial, his Foolish Burial. He's got his Return as well, and a copy of Phoenix Wing Windblast. This is honestly one of the sleeper picks from this weekend. I think almost every single deck in the top 8 was either playing this or like not playing trap cards, more or less. I think there's one exception to that, but this card was huge. We saw it do a lot of major stuff. If your deck can support Phoenix Wing Windblast, it might be one of the best trap cards in the format. More data on that after we get through the top 8, for sure. For the sideboard, he's got his 2 Zombie Worlds for the Monarch matchup. Easy side in, side out for the 2 copies of Caius. Makes sense. Got his Pulling the Rugs for Diva Hero. Light Imprisoning for Fairies and Lightsworn. Starlight Road for Blackwings. Just a lot of like good catch-all stuff. In the extra deck, you've got your Doom Kaiser and you've got your Revive King. Your stock zombie synchros, which are both very powerful. He's also included a copy of Gaia Knight, the Force of the Earth, as an additional level 6 to go into. This card's pretty strong. It's got 2600 attack. It attacks over Absolute Zero and Stardust Dragon, notably. So, pretty good card. Pretty solid inclusion. Also allows you to go for Diva ladder combos without having to waste one of your 2 other generic level 6s, which is Brownic and Goyo Guardian. Strong zombie list for sure. Up next, 6th place, Pro Storm Fairy Control deck. This deck is very similar to a deck that I've played on the channel. Actually, Pro Storm and I exchanged a few notes before the tournament, and he playtested the deck, honestly, a lot. He made some pretty big changes, and I think they worked out really well for him this event. He decided to cut the Book of Moons in favor of Smashing Ground due to the prevalence of Absolute Zero and other aggro decks like Blackwings in the metagame right now. And he also opted to include 2 Dust Tornado in the main deck as a way to hate out Floodgate cards, an additional back row that might give him trouble summoning one of his 3 copies of Christia. He opted not to play Soul of Purity and Light. Instead, he opted for a 2nd copy of Freed the Brave Wanderer, which is honestly super sick. There was a match on camera, which I will be covering matches from this tournament in detail on this channel during the next week, where he had an Alchemist in play. He banished for the effect of his Alchemist, used his own Freed to destroy his own Alchemist to set up for a Christia drop to add back one of the cards he banished from. It was so crazy. It was such a sick move. Very, very powerful stuff from Pro Storm, and a very, very strong finish. In the sideboard, everything looks pretty standard. He's got these 2 copies of DD Crow, which he told me were for additional hate in the Dragon Turbo matchup. He said in testing that it was a difficult matchup, and that DD Crow helped improve that quite a bit. In the extra deck, he's got Flamvell Urukizas in his tech slot, and I think this card is very good. It helps you get in the last few points of damage through piercing, and you can make it fairly easily with Herald of Orange Light and any one of your level 4 monsters in this deck. He opted not to include the Avenging Knight Parshath or the Light End Dragon because he's not playing Soul of Purity and Light, which makes sense. You can't make that without those. And he's got 2 copies of Chimera Tech to maximize on his 2 Cyber Dragons in the sideboard. Really strong list. Congrats to Pro Storm for bringing one of my favorite decks to a top 8 finish in the biggest Edison tournament since the Shona Jump. Next up is the deck list that, my goodness, this deck is so sick. I have never seen anything like this in Edison format. It's an Amaryllis Burn deck. This is just such a sick deck. On top of playing 3 copies of Phoenix Cluster Amaryllis and 3 copies of Titania, he's got 3 copies of Volcanic Counter. The way this card works is if it's in your graveyard, you banish it when you take battle damage. Then, after you banish it, if there's another fire monster in your graveyard, your opponent takes damage equal to the damage you took. Carpath chose to approach the metagame being hyper aggressive from the, if you're going to attack me, you're going to take that much damage route. Another thing you'll see are the Phoenix Wing Wind Blasts, which play very well in this deck because they set up your graveyard for the Phoenix Cluster Amaryllis to come back in the end phase, and they also set up your graveyard for your Volcanic Counters. He has a lot of really high impact discards between the Amaryllis, the Volcanic Counter, the Necrogardener, and the Plague, and he's got this really cool Hidden Armory package in the deck, which plays 1 Mark of the Rose and 1 DDR and 3 Hidden Armory. Hidden Armory allows you to get equipped spellbacks from your graveyard as well as from your deck, so you only need to play 2 targets for it, since it's like a Rhoda / Warrior Returning Alive for your equipped spells. And these cards help you go big and over the top with your main plant engine. DDR acts as another discard outlet to maybe get some of these dead plant cards out of your hand and keep your Phoenixian Cluster online. And you've got 3 trade-in to help discard them as well. Lots of random milling between the Card Trooper, the Raikou, and the Charge of the Light Brigade, so it's just a very cohesive burn strategy that aims to do a lot of big hits with the volcanic counter, maybe crashing a dandelion token into a large monster, and then maybe chipping out the last few points with the Amaryllis 800 pings. In the sideboard, you've got some absolute bangers. You've got Gemini Imps, which is a way to counter Royal Tribute, which obviously Gravekeepers are going to give this deck a big problem, with Volcanic counter and Phoenixing Cluster Amaryllis just struggling. Gemini Imps is one of the few ways you can sort of combat that strategy. He's also got 3 copies of Fiend Comedian, which we saw him use on camera to counter Future Fusion from a Dragon deck. This also works exceptionally well if you call it wrong, because you mill a lot of your high impact mill cards and set up your graveyard for the rest of the game. This card is really sweet in this strategy, and I think it's one of the sickest cards that we've seen successfully played in the top 8 of an Edison tournament, let alone the biggest Edison tournament. Did I mention it's the biggest Edison tournament since the Shonen Jump? Did I mention this? Anyway, Dust Tornado, Bottomless Trap Hole to round out the deck. A lot of synchros to round out the deck. Pretty dope stuff. Really, really dope stuff. I'm definitely going to be trying out this deck sometime in the near future on the channel. Shoutouts to Carpath for bringing something completely unique and completely original and crushing this tournament. Next up, in 4th place, we've got a user who has been grinding the Edison ladder on FL the last week, Gia76. She topped with Alias Hero Beat and did so with a really exceptional showcase of skill. The deck looks akin to Pro Storm's top list from Pumpkin of Games. It's almost identical, I believe. I think it might be an extra copy of Starlight Road over a 3rd D Prison or something like that, but it's more or less the same exact list. The strength in this deck lies in, of course, using Absolute Zero. That's it. Gia cut the Super Polys from the sideboard, opted to play Smashing Grounds, Heavy Storm, some more generic removal and 1/1 stuff, just to give a more well-rounded finish to the deck, and it was a huge success for her. Congrats again on the top 4 finish. 3rd place, another first-time top for this deck, Norlaris Dragons. Pizza played this crazy brew. I mean, it's as close as it gets to an original deck list that you're going to see in a top 8 of a tournament. Triple Dark Chorus, Triple Dark Creator to feed your trade-ins. You've got Future Fusion and, of course, the Norlaris Phantom of Chaos combo, which combos well with Plague and Gold Sarcophagus, stacking your deck or banishing a key card that you get after nuking everybody's everything. In the sideboard, he's got 2 copies of Electric Virus, which I'm assuming come in the Dragon Mirror, help you get cheese OTKs, 2 Lightning Vortexes for stuff that stops you from special summoning or maybe negates your effects, double Dust Tornado, Eradicator Epidemic Virus, and 2 Deck Devastation Viruses, as well as Mystical Space Typhoon. Really, really nuts. These 2 Royal Decrees put in a ton of work for him. We saw them on camera to huge success. If you guys have watched the tournament VOD or whatnot, you'll definitely get to see him use that against Blackwings, and boy, was it nuts. Boy, was that Royal Decree nuts. And of course, Mask of Restrict for anything that's trying to tribute stuff. Really, really solid deck list, and he played it really, really well. There were some really cool plays I think I saw on camera. Nothing's coming to mind right now, but I remember him doing some fancy stuff. No cap. Shout out to him on his 3rd place finish with a first time top 8 for this deck. Well done, Pizza. 2nd place, you know him. You've seen him in our top 8s before. Silchus Ruin playing Diva Hero yet again. He's the guy who got the first top in Edison Legends, and he's still in the top 3. Every tournament he's played, he's placed in the top 3 with this deck, which is insane. It's super impressive. This tournament, he opted for some new techs. He opted for the 1 copy of Alias, so he could include the emergency call to search for Stratos, give yourself a few extra openers. He went down to 2 Snowman Eater from his previous list, but he's still opting not to include the Armageddon Plague and Dark Arm package, in favor of triple Upstart Goblin for maximum consistency. Another thing that he's maxed out on is these discard traps. 3 Phoenix Wing Windblast and Regeki Break. Again, Phoenix Wing Windblast showing its power in this 2nd place deck. It was able to remove Floodgates for him all day. It was able to remove key threats for him all day. It was able to set up his graveyard by pitching Malicious, pitching a Water, pitching whatever he needed to get his engine online, pitching Treeborn even. And then, of course, you've got your 4 limited power traps to round out the deck. In the sideboard, he has 2 Fossil Dinos and a Vanity's Fiend. And in the extra deck, he's made room for both the Gaia and the Chimera tech, as well as the Gashilnadon. Cutting into the level 8s, not playing Thought Ruler or Red Dragon, and also opting not to play Mistworm. Apparently that worked out for him, and it was pretty strong. Every time we saw him on camera, he was killing it. He actually won the most games out of anyone in this tournament. I'll show a little graph of all the people who, like, how much they won, how much the top 8 players won. Since it's a double elimination bracket, some people did have to play more matches if they lost earlier on in order to make it through to the top 8. In the sideboard, there was 3 copies of Dust Tornado. This card was super important. There was a lot of key floodgates, locking people out of games. Royal Oppression's a big one. But of course, Mask of Restrict, Imperial Iron Wall, you know, all these like weird floodgates came up throughout the whole weekend. And Dust Tornado just made sure that you weren't going to get cheesed by any of those floodgates. And finally, last but not least, Foatman's Vayu Turbo deck list. This guy played absolutely insanely cracked. He played a full 3 copies of Dark Grepher, which is inarguably the best starter in the deck if you have a copy of Blackwing Sirocco or Elfin the Raven in your starting hand. He played 2 copies of Caius. He played 3 Raikou with the Hamster and the Charge. He played the standard Trap Suite for the deck as well as the standard Spell Suite for the deck. He went down to 1 Armageddon Knight, opting to include the 3rd Grepher instead, which I think is a really, really smart play. A Grepher gives you an auto 4,000 plus damage combo if you open it with any one of these 7 cards, and it also helps set up for Dark Arm Dragon as quickly as possible. These Greffers put in a ton of work for him in the tournament. There was hardly a game we had him on camera where he didn't have a Grepher on turn 1, and he wasn't putting his opponent on a turn 2 clock immediately. In the sideboard, there's nothing too out of the ordinary. You've got the Gores, you've got the Vanity's Fiends, and the Deck Devs for matchups like that. You've got 2 Pulling the Rug, which I think, again, is a new metagame inclusion. It's really good against the Diva Hero deck. It's really good against Monarch decks. It's also really good against stuff like Quick Draw Plants, where they're playing Debris Dragon, Caius, you know, just stuff that you want to stop. Also helps in the Machina Gadget matchup a ton too as well. In the extra deck, you've got your 6 Blackwing Synchros and the best of all the other levels, opting not to include Mistworm in favor of the Chimera tech. Really, really powerful stuff to Foatman. He didn't lose a single match all day. Congratulations to him. He played exceptionally well. He beat, you know, insanely powerful players to get to the first place slot. And I think this is definitely going to solidify Vayu as one of the most powerful decks in the format for sure, and definitely a deck you need to have on your radar moving forward. That's going to round out the top 8. I'm going to show a few more graphs. I'm going to show how many matches each of these players won. You guys can check that out here. And if you guys stuck through to the end of the video, make sure you like and you subscribe. Make sure you've left a comment. Make sure you've become a member if you want to. I mean, shout out to the people who have become members during the live stream and, you know, over the last week. It's been super helpful to the tournament. It helped us increase the prize payout and everything. So shout out to you guys. I've included one extra bonus deck list from the tournament that quite a few people were asking about. This is Prince of Puddles' Alien deck list. Unfortunately for Prince of Puddles, he missed top cut just barely, going 6-2. But a 75% win rate with an Alien deck, I mean, I gotta showcase it. I gotta show it on the channel. He has 2 copies of Thunder King, lots of really powerful continuous spells and traps that he could reuse with his Cosmic Fortress Golgar. And this is such a sweet deck list. I can't wait to try it out on the channel in the next coming weeks. Lots of really, really cool stuff. Prohibition, fucking insane card. Just so sick. This whole list is so sick. Anyway, shout out to you guys sticking around to the end of the video. Thanks again for 3,000 subscribers, which is something we hit yesterday as well. And thanks for helping me throw the biggest tournament in Edison format since the Shonen Jump. Fuck yeah. Lots more to come. Can't wait for RBET Series 2, which is on March 26th. Definitely do not miss that. If you guys can't compete on March 26th, it will be streamed live just the same as yesterday. So stay tuned for that kind of thing. E3 Yu-Gi-Oh! Signing off. Peace out, everyone.